Hello and welcome back to Macabre Mondays. So yeah, if you guys didn't know the intro to this video, we're of course doing a series of horror movie reviews related to the Universal monsters. I love the Universal monsters, grew up with all of them, every single monster I watched as a kid, and just love all the films in that series that Universal has done. So of course, we're going to do a review, if you guys didn't know, of Frankenstein. This, of course, is a legacy Blu-ray collection. Very nice, very cool. And it wouldn't be a proper movie review for you guys without talking about the book, the original Mary Shelley. I'll just put that to the side, actually. The original Mary Shelley book. And of course, if you're wondering what book edition this is, there's actually two editions out there. There's the 1818 version and the 1831 version. Of course, this is the widely available 1831 version, but this is actually kind of a cool edition because it contains illustrations, comic book illustrations, I should say, but pretty cool nonetheless. So, yeah, this is, the 1831 version, as I said. Main difference from the 1818 version and the 1831 version is that the 1831 version's essentially edited form from Mary Shelley's original novel. In the 1818 version, she had to do some changes. I don't know what the changes were, but from my understanding from fans online, apparently the changes were because of the fact of political reasons at the time. A lot of I don't know. I think she had a lot of feminism views. I really don't know, but at the time it was kind of a little edgy at the time, so she had to make a second draft of the book and kind of revised it in a way to make it more, attainable for public audiences at the time. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. And you're probably wondering, for Universal monster fans out there too, well, how come you're doing Frankenstein first and not Dracula? Well, simple, straightforward reason right there. I actually haven't finished reading Dracula yet, so that's pretty much the main reason there. See, barely made the dent into it. Basically haven't read it yet, so that's pretty much the main reason why I haven't read Dracula yet. Plus, it wouldn't be a proper movie review without comparing the book to the movie anyways, so yeah, I just wanted to do a brief explanation about that anyways, in case anybody's wondering how come I'm not doing Dracula first. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out in case for Universal monster fans wondering how come I'm not doing Dracula first. There's your reason right there. It's because, well, I haven't read the book yet, and it wouldn't be a proper review without reading the book and comparing it to the movie, just like I'm doing now with Frankenstein. And also, you're probably wondering, will I be also doing reviews for Creature from the Black Lagoon and The Invisible Man? And that short answer is no. Originally, these reviews were supposed to be addendums to, well, my horror movie reviews, and if you're a long-time subscriber, for all 10 of you out there, yeah, I know that was cheesy, that laugh track, but doing Macabre Mondays also is because, well, these are kind of like a continuation from my planned horror movie reviews. And essentially, in those planned horror movie reviews for Halloween back in October, I only included Dracula movies, Frankenstein movies, The Mummy, and The Wolfman. Main reason being also is, again, if you didn't see the Legacy Blu-ray set there, Universal, for some odd reason, hasn't released Legacy Blu-ray sets of their last remaining monster movies, being the Invisible Man and Creature from the Black Lagoon. So I just wanted to address that too, in case anybody's wondering if I'm going to include those movies as well. Simple answer is no, because there's no Blu-ray sets available. There is DVD sets. I'll probably post it somewhere here in this video. Might be here, might be here. I don't know, but there is the DVD legacy sets of those two movies. I'm not in any rush to get them because sadly they're very long out of print and fetching collectors' prices. So I'd much rather wait for a proper Blu-ray release. So with all set aside, let's actually get into the movie reviews, shall we? Instead of just, rambling on. So at a time when Dracula was released, Universal had an unexpected hit on their hands with Dracula. And of course, like with any movie studio, they want to continue on with it. So their general consensus was, well, if the movie audiences want more monster movies at the time, they of course wanted to cash in immediately because with the huge hit on unexpectedly on their hands being that it came out in the dirty 30s, the Great Depression era of, well, the 30s, and Dracula being such a huge unexpected hit from that, they of course went with Frankenstein, which actually is quite a logical choice, to be honest. And also, originally, Frankenstein was supposed to be played, not Frankenstein the creator, Frankenstein monster. A lot of people get that confused. But the Frankenstein monster was supposed to be played by none other than Bela Lugosi. And plus, Renfield from Dracula is also played by a hunchback assistant named Fritz. Yes, not Igor, Fritz. So there's your two um, Dracula connections there. Originally, it was supposed to be Bela Lugosi as the monster, and, well, Renfield from the movie, who's played by the brilliant Dwight Fry, was actually named Fritz in the movie. Yes, not Igor, because, well, Igor is also played by Bela Lugosi in one of the later Frankenstein movies, which is specifically Ghost of Frankenstein. And kind of interesting because pulp culture, of course, meshes the Hunchback assistant and the name Igor for everything now. They even made a movie of Igor talking about that. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting how general, pop culture combined those two things out of nowhere, even though it's not in the book or the movie. But yeah, originally Bela Lugosi kind of got off the rails there, but originally Bela Lugosi was supposed to play the monster in the movie, and quite frankly, I'm kind of glad that Universal at the time didn't went with Bela Lugosi. I'm sure it would have been interesting, but the way the makeup looks, the way that the design looks, it wouldn't really suit this tone of the movie. I think they were trying to do the book justice, but just doesn't look right. Sometimes things have to be taken away from the book in order to adapt the movie. So that's probably one of the main reasons why they, went with a different actor. And of course, they casted the brilliant Boris Karloff as the monster. So with all that said, let's actually get into the opening of the movie. So the movie starts out at a graveyard scene where we see two of the actors that I just mentioned, Frankenstein and his hunchback assistant Fitz that I just mentioned. And of course, played by two brilliant actors, of course. Dwight Fry, who plays Fitz, that I just mentioned, and of course, Frankenstein, who is played by none other than Colin Clive. And I say that Colin Clive in a bit of an exaggerated tone because Colin Clive is actually a very good actor in this movie, and he's, perfectly casted as, Dr. Frankenstein. So yes, Frankenstein and Fitz go to the graveyard and try to steal a body there for, well, Frankenstein's experiment. So they and of course proceed to the next area of town, which again, it's not specific what town it's called. It's basically some sort of European town. James Whale, the director of the movie, who used to be a play director, and Universal signed him on for this movie, wanted to really have a real German feel for it. Well, his main inspiration for that reason was because he was a huge fan of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So you see a lot of German expressionism in this movie. So, which is something I wanted to point out too. There's a lot of German expressionism in this movie. It's quite brilliant, actually. Anyway, so after Dr. Frankenstein and his assistant Fitz steal a body from the graveyard, they go to the next scene where they see a body hanging, and of course, Frankenstein wants a bunch of bodies for his experiment and combine different organs, etc., for his experiment. So they steal that body as well and put it on the cart to get into his castle, which his experiment is at. So Fitz brings down the hanging body, puts in the cart, and of course, you can't have a body or experimented body without having the main objective, the brain. So Dr. Frankenstein sends Fitz, his assistant, to his old college lab where Dr. Wellman, yes, Dr. Wellman from the book, they actually adapt Dr. Wellman quite well in the book, who's played by the brilliant Edward Van Sloan. He doesn't have a big role in the movie. However, he kind of gets killed off. Spoiler alert: gets killed off around 15 minutes in, 20 minutes in the movie. So that's actually kind of sucky that they didn't develop his character more, because he's actually quite has a predominant role in the book than in the movie. He actually plays a bit into Dr. Frankenstein's childhood as well, Dr. Wellman, and kind of feels his obsession with science, the afterlife, etc., as stated in the book. Anyway, so Fitz goes over from orders from his, boss, Frankenstein, goes over to eventually get a brain from the lab for his creation. So obviously he goes over to his old college campus, to which Dr. Wellman's giving a lecture about the human anatomy, specifically about the brain. Now this scene plays out. This is a bit of foreshadowing in the scene, because plays into the creation of the monster, obviously. Dr. Wellman is talking about the human anatomy, about the brain, and he has two little jars there on his desk. One of them's a normal brain, one of them's an abnormal brain. The abnormal brain has more, as he says in Edward Van Sloan's brilliant, dialogue and acting. He says the abnormal brain is a bit, unspontaneous, has a lot more aggression, etc., because it's from a criminal, insane person, they say in the movie. The normal brain, however, is a lot more functioning. It's a lot more normal, etc. So that's basically foreshadowing. The scene is talking about the two differences in the brain, and main reason for the monster's kind of abrupt emotions. So when that scene is playing out, of course, the lecture ends. Edward Van Sloan's Dr. Wellman leaves, etc. So the lab is empty. So Fitz finally makes his, dramatic entrance into the lab and tries to steal the brain. However, Fitz fails dismally because, unfortunately, he doesn't steal the right brain. He gets accidentally spooked by some medical skeleton in this college, and unfortunately, out of hesitation and trying to avoid, being noticed, he steals the normal brain. So then we go into the next scene of the movie where Elizabeth, who is Dr. Frank, in the not both Elizabeth is supposed to be both the love interest and wife of Dr. Frankenstein in the book and also in the movie, so they adapt that pretty well too. Elizabeth is going to be wed to Dr. Frankenstein, whose name is Henry. I should actually probably bring that up too. Henry Frankenstein is only named Henry Frankenstein in the movie. In the book, he's named Victor, and Henry Frankenstein's his middle name. So Universal decided to use his middle name for, his first name, so that gets kind of confusing. Anyway, so in the scene, Elizabeth, Frankenstein's fiance, starts to get worried about Henry's disappearance and his focus on his science experiment. And obviously, with being concerned, she hires, not really hires, but brings in a friend of Frankenstein to ask about what's going on, because she's supposed to be wed to him and she doesn't know what's happening with him lately. So his friend is named Victor Mortez, which is actually not a character in the book. It's completely changed for this movie. I don't know why. I guess Universal thought Frankenstein needed a friend in the book. That's actually completely original from the movie. Is that from the book, Frankenstein has no actual friends. It's just Elizabeth that he's his only friend and future love interest. So Victor Mortez is actually a complete character in the book. I mean, complete character in the movie. So which is actually kind of interesting. So Victor Mortez tells Elizabeth that Frankenstein's been working on, his science experiment for quite some time. And he's concerned also because he hasn't been around the university, campus in a while. So out of hesitation, they go to one of his professors, Dr. Wellman. And while they go to Dr. Wellman's also concerned because he says that he talked to Victor, not Victor. It's going to get confusing, I know, but Henry Frankenstein about his science experiment. So Dr. Wellman knows that Henry's been working on his science experiment a long time, and out of concern, they want to see what's going on, and eventually they do. So in the next scene, they go over to Dr. Frankenstein's castle where Henry's working on his experiment. And of course, he wants to show them what he's been working on. And this is actually where "It's Alive," the memorable line it's alive" scene comes out. Line comes out from is this scene right here. So the scene plays out like this. Henry Frankenstein is demonstrating the monster. Of course, it's a dark, stormy night, lightning, thunder, rain, etc. So you see all these science experiments, doodads, which is just awesome. I love this scene when it plays out because you see the spectacular light show going on, the sparks flying when the monster gets created, all that stuff. So Frankenstein raises a monster on this little crate bed to where it's the main source of the storms coming from, all the thunder and lightning. That's how the monster gets created because, and the scene, the monster is covered up, by the way, because at the time Universal didn't want to reveal the big monsters. There's actually a big question mark in the credits about who's played by the monster. Of course, now we all know it's Boris Karloff, but they didn't want to blow the big secret away about who the monster is played by. But you see through the covering of the monster, you see that there's bolts. So that's the main, source of life that the monster is being made, is that the bolts through his neck through the lightning's going to bring him life. So Frankenstein raises him up. You see a spectacular light show go on. He raises him down once the monster's, what he believes is when the storm finally creates a monster. And then this is when it's alive line comes on. So Frankenstein's monster starts twitching a bit, and then he's excited because he just created life, and he finally says, it's alive, now I know what it's like to be God. Now that scene was actually, the God line was actually cut out for a lot of reasons, because at the time it was kind of edgy for a lot of people. A lot of people were kind of offended by it. Of course, now it got edited into the movie because we're past those times now. So that's actually pretty cool that they kind of had to censor it at the time because they didn't want to, offend the masses there. The thing too, though, is that, and from the book, it's actually never specified how Frankenstein's monster gets created. In the book, I forgot to mention, opens up in Antarctica instead of at some graveyard. Frankenstein doesn't have an assistant at all, and he gets pricked up by sailors in the book. And through that scene there, sorry, just had to scratch my head. Through that scene of the book, Frankenstein gives his background about why is he there, etc., and talks about the creation of the monster and how it had a mind of its own and all that stuff. So in the book, he talks about his creation. However, he doesn't go into too much depth about how specifically what he creates, but it's generally assumed that he uses chemicals to create, the monster. It's not thunder or lightning. And the Universal film, thunder, lightning, and all that stuff, electricity, all that is completely original thought for the movie. So, which is actually, I thought was kind of interesting that Universal decided to do that creative twist there instead of actually following the book. So they kind of wanted to do a big spectacular, scene for that movie that's different from the book. I'm sure it would have been interesting to see the whole chemical thing. I know in the Edison film, apparently that adapts the actual creature's original creation there from the Edison silent film. So that's actually kind of interesting, I thought. But anyways, once Frankenstein is ecstatic about his creation, he wants to see how the monster acts. So he has a monster locked into some sort of dungeon. He brings it up, and the camera slowly moves forward where the creature is in the dungeon. Fitz brings him out, and the camera shows this brilliant close-up shot of, Jack Pierce's makeup. Jack Pierce, if you guys don't know, is the main makeup artist for all these Universal monster films. Just a phenomenal, talented artist, just amazing. And this has to be one of my favorite shots in the movie. You get a nice close-up shot of Boris Karloff's face, and it's just spectacular. I just love this scene because it just shows the detail, the intricate detail of Boris Karloff's makeup. He apparently had to remove a mouthpiece. I can't remember what it was about, but I think he had a crown or something in his mouthpiece that he had to remove for the movie because they wanted to have like kind of a very drab, dark, very corpse-like face. So you kind of see the little gaunt mouth cheek there, and it's just amazing. One of my favorite close-up shots in the movie is that close-up shot of Boris's Karloff makeup. And actually plays into some effect why some people relate to Frankenstein, because as Frankenstein seems very, not shouldn't say Frankenstein, but a lot of people seem to sympathize with the monster because, and monster seems kind of childlike in his emotions because he's kind of, when he's trying to demonstrate, Dr. Frankenstein trying to demonstrate the monster to his, small group of audience, being Dr. Weldman, Victor, and Elizabeth. He's very childlike. He's very, slow, kind of just very slow, taking the moments in. And Frankenstein opens the roof, and it's actually a beautiful scene. Boris Karloff just really nails this scene to a T. Sorry, my screen went there. But Boris Karloff nails this scene to the T where Henry Frankenstein wants to demonstrate the monster, and the Frankenstein monster goes over to you know, the uh, opening of the roof. And when Frankenstein opens the roof, there's light coming down, and he starts giving commands like sit and stuff. He sits, etc. But there's a beautiful scene where, as soon as he stands up, he raises his hand and is actually like trying to sort of reach the sky type of thing. He's very, he's basically like a newborn. This is all new to him. So, and he picks notes in the air as soon as music starts playing. It's just beautiful, brilliant scene by the always great Boris Karloff, and it's just a very beautiful, very simple scene, and you kind of sympathize with this monster because it's just very childlike in his emotions, very hasn't done anything very bad. And you actually kind of feel sorry because Fitz, being kind of a idiot in the movie, he brings out a torch in the movie trying to get more out of the monster, and he of course gets scared and very petrified of flames. So he starts acting belligerently, and Dr. Wellman, out of concern, says that this monster should probably be kept within, the dungeon and shouldn't be released to the public. So, of course, Frankenstein abides by Dr. Wellman's orders and keeps it in the dungeon. So, in the next scene, Fitz is again trying to torture the monster. The monster is chained up, screaming and stuff out of agony, and Fitz is tampering the monster with the flame torch. Of course, the monster breaks free, kills Fitz, and you hear a scream going out of the hallway as Frankenstein and Dr. Wellman are trying to talk about what they're going to do about the monster and how they're going to, destroy him essentially, because Dr. Wellman's concern is this monster is going to, wreak havoc upon the town, etc. So they hear the scream play out. They try to see what's the matter, and you see the body of Fitz hanging in the background. The monster sees sees Dr. Wellman and Frankenstein watching them, and he tries to attack them. And of course, Dr. Wellman has a sedative in his pocket, stabs the monster, and eventually renders him unconscious. So Dr. Wellman, within his orders, says that he wants to, eventually kill the monster off using his own experiments. So he goes upstairs to, kill the monster off for all. And obviously the sedative that was worked on the monster doesn't work at all. The monster wakes up from his coma-like state and attacks Dr. Wellman and eventually escapes. I should also mention too, I forgot to mention, through the attack, Dr. Frankenstein, I think, faints from between the scene where the monster tries to attack him, he faints. So he's off trying to, recuperate from his accident, and he's more focused on his, health and his concern to marry Elizabeth. So that's the scene that plays out. So the monster escapes and essentially wreaks havoc in the town. Well, not really wreak havoc yet. Of course, there's other scenes that involve with it too. Now, I should also bring up during which the monster escapes, there's also kind of a controversial scene in the movie, and that scene's, of course, the monster meets the little girl at the river. And yeah, it's quite brutal, actually, quite sad. So in this scene, when the monster escapes from Frankenstein's castle, he of course sees a little girl. It's actually kind of beautiful behind the scenes too, because the little girl, the actress who plays the little girl in the movie, um, actually had quite a soft spot for Boris Karloff's design, and really, apparently she wanted, apparently, when they were trying to shoot the scene, James Whale asked if she wanted to ride with him or, with Boris Karloff. But apparently, she loved Boris Karloff so much, so they went to, she went to see, ride with Boris Karloff in the monster makeup instead of, trying to film the scene. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I thought that was kind of cute behind the scenes moment. So, anyways, not Doctor, sorry, Frankenstein, of course, escapes, goes down by the river where he meets the little girl, and the little girl's just, her dad left to go into town, and the little girl sees a monster, and of course she's not frightened by him because he's very, she's a little kid, she doesn't know, bad things. She doesn't really know strangers, etc. So she just acts friendly towards him because she's like a little kid. She doesn't know um, her whereabouts, and she doesn't realize that this guy's a creature, etc. She sees a monster and is not frightened by him. She carries small talk about what's his name, etc. And of course, the monster doesn't speak because he's just been freshly created. He's essentially like an infant. So she asks him if she wants to play, and one of the games they play is like trying to, I believe it's throwing flowers into the water type thing. So they throw flowers into the water, and unfortunately, this is that like I said, the controversial scene in the movie. Frankenstein, I guess the monster Frankenstein, I should say, unfortunately, while playing with the flowers in the water, he sees them floating. The girl can float in the water too because of the flowers floating, etc. So he picks up the little girl and throws her in the river. And of course, she's screaming and stuff, and the monster Frankenstein is regretting his decision. And just brilliant acting by Boris Karloff again. He's very, very expressive facial expressions, very sad and facial expressions, very in a shocked state what he did. And he, of course, runs off. And just a very disturbing scene. You hear the girl screaming, etc., in the background. And he goes off into another part of town. Well, I shouldn't say the monster goes off into another part of time. It mysteriously disappears after that, very disturbing scene. While the monster leaves the lake scene, Victor tells Henry, during which he's recuperating from, the monster's attacks in the castle, tells him that the monster strangled Dr. Weldman. And while that scene plays out, you actually find out after the monster, after the monster threw the little girl into the lake, he's actually in Elizabeth's room trying to spy on her. He walks into Elizabeth's room, and you just see that brilliant scene where he walks into the room and does "Rrr," and Elizabeth freaks out, of course, and is scared. Meanwhile, this is going on. Elizabeth is unconscious, and then the townspeople are hosting a big celebration because of the fact that Henry Frankenstein's finally marrying Elizabeth. It's a big deal because Frankenstein family is a big hierarchy in town, and quite well known. So, meanwhile, like I said before, the little girl's dad that leaves the scene where little girl meets the monster and gets thrown into the lake. Just a really dramatic scene, as I mentioned. Well, the dad is literally carrying the body of the dead little girl in his hands, her daughter, and he's walking very, as like any parent would if their kid got killed, very depressing and disbelief face, and he's walking very, slow. Everybody's looking at him in shock. It's a very dramatic scene. Question about why this girl died, and her father, who I should mention the girl's name is Maria. So the girl's father, of course, explains why and that she's been murdered. And of course, townspeople connect dots and they believe that's a creature that was, around from the Frankenstein's castle to the lake to eventually when they find out Elizabeth had been unconscious. So they basically connect the dots together from there. So of course they get a hint that the monsters in the mountains somewhere in the Franks in this European town. And of course, the Baron Master wants led into a search party to track the monster out, dead or alive. They want to kill this monster. So Frankenstein leads one group, the villagers leave one group. They descend into the mountains. Frankenstein's leaving, and hears the villagers, coming at him with torches, fire torches, etc. So Dr. Frankenstein sees his creation and tries to go after him. Unfortunately, the monster attacks him, renders him unconscious, and then carries him out. The villagers see where he's going. He's of course going to the windmill, and this is the iconic, windmill scene that plays out in the movie. So as the villagers go to the windmill, they see that Frankenstein and the monster are there and try to set the place ablaze. And Frankenstein, of course, is locked up with Dr. Frankenstein. It's a brilliant scene too, because meanwhile, with their confrontation in the windmill, you see a very nice camera shot. Like, this is the windmill here, but you see a point of view from Frankenstein's point of view and the monster's point of view, which was just brilliant because you see the creator looking at his creation, sort of a yin and yang type thing. This is a brilliant scene. I love it, and you see just a really good scene. Just amazing. So of course, as soon as the chaos is breaking out in the red mill, the Frankenstein monster tries to throw Dr. Frankenstein out of the windmill, and the place is set ablaze. The windmill is set ablaze. Frankenstein is okay. It's actually kind of a goofy scene because as the monster throws fake bodies, kind of notice that it's a fake body because, of course, being 1931, special effects weren't really, computers weren't around, CGI weren't around, practical effects weren't as advanced as now. So, yeah, it plays out kind of cheesy. So Henry Frankenstein falls out of the windmill from the monster being thrown at him. So he falls out of the windmill, eventually lands on the ground. The whole windmill is set ablaze. The monster's freaking out, going crazy because he's afraid of fire and the flames. He goes crazy about it, and just the windmill gets set ablaze. And while the movie could have ended there, of course, it has to end on a happy note, then a somber note. You later find out that Henry Frankenstein is eventually um, good. His father checks him out, and it's eventually at the end, you know, it just ties it all together where Henry Frankenstein's dad says he's fine. And so, yeah, that pretty much ends the movie right there. Very happy note, and quite frankly, one of the best movie endings ever, and it's a really good ending to a good movie. And I think a lot of people like Frankenstein out of the more universal monster movies because he's quite the way Boris Karloff portrays him is a very childlike monster that people can relate to, and probably kids relate to Frankenstein more, the monster that is, because he's very much like a big, overgrown kid. And like I said, it's just a very good movie to watch, at home. And it actually does, despite the fact they do changes from the book, they actually, Universal did actually adapt some elements of the book, like I said, but they, did them more, tastefully, so that way it's more generalized for the movie going audience to really get synced into. So yeah, it gets a fantastic review, a fantastic rating for me. So again, if you're wondering about my rating system, again, I'll just generalize it here. Fantastic is 5 out of 5. Good is just 4 out of 5. Okay is 3 out of 5. Good but terrible is 2 out of 5, and just terrible is 1 out of 5. So that's basically my rating system for movies that going forward. I know I do rating systems out of numerical order, but I figured that we'd do it a little different for movie reviews. So fantastic for the 1931 version of Frankenstein. and still to this day one of my favorite Universal movie monster films out of probably all of them. So that is it for the 1931 version of Frankenstein. Overall, pretty good movie. Highly recommended, as I said, and well, it's just a fun time if you like black and white horror films and Universal monster films in general. So yeah, I know it was kind of different and all over the place, but again, trying to experiment more with my channel and try to do more movie reviews for you guys to, so I won't be. I know I've been doing toy reviews lately, but I kind of want to do more with this channel anyway. So, kind of variety is a nice thing, don't you say? So that is it for this week's Movie Macabre Monday movie review. I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, stay tuned for more content for me and more, well, whatever comes out for movie review wise. So yeah, if you like this video, give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe down below for more content from me. So as always, from Morgan Entertainment, stay entertained.